I think that our first record and like some of the splits we did were real riff heavy and like kind of more on the traditional side of doom and sludge, you know. And then as we evolved as a band, we really wanted to create atmosphere, create a sense of dread and overwhelming power and pressure and weight in the sound because the subject matter is very deep. So for me, I want people to have like a small taste of what that turmoil at the time may have felt like for me. The music is to reflect that. And I think that the only way to really do that is by having a fuckload of amps and for being very loud and for dialing your tone in to do it in a specific way. Like,
hey, what's up, everyone? Matt here from Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox&Hops Metal Podcast. I hope that you had a killer weekend. I most certainly did. This Vox&Hops episode is presented by Heavy Montreal. Heavy Montreal are Montreal's premier metal promoter, and if you are ever in Montreal, trust me when I say this, if you are looking for a killer show to go to, Heavy Montreal will have you covered. I am beyond stoked to have Heavy Montreal behind the Vox&Hops Metal Podcast. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I'd just like to ask you to follow the Vox&Hops Metal Podcast on the podcast platform of your choice. But more than that, I would love for you to tell a friend about the podcast. If there's someone in your life that just loves extreme music and loves craft beer, well, you should definitely let them know that the Vox&Hops Metal Podcast exists. You could tell them that there are over 400 episodes where I sit down with some of the world's best metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while enjoying craft beers. If you would encourage one of your metalhead beer-loving friends to become a brand new Vox&Hops head, that would be something that I would truly appreciate. This week on the podcast, I'm very stoked to be with Ethan McCarthy of Primitive Man and Vermin Womb. Get ready, everyone. This is Vox&Hops episode number 446.
I warn you, what you are about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Today I'm very stoked to be with Ethan Lee McCarthy of Primitive Man and Vermin Womb. Ethan, very stoked to be with you. I've been wanting to have a chat with you for a long time, and this happens super organically, and I love when these happen. No more publicists. I'm just reaching out to people like I used to do for the first 100 episodes, just connecting with people that I'm connected with through the internet on this one, and that's because my review crew, what member, Ben Lelievre, put you at number 2 for his favorite album of 2023. Your split with Full of Hell, The Suffocating Hallucination, was in his number 2 spot, and that spawned this conversation. And here we are. Very long intro just to say, Ethan, how you doing?
I'm well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Super stoked to connect with you. I want to talk about loud stuff. I want to talk about horror, making people feel uncomfortable. But before all that, it's Vox&Hops, and I like to talk about beer. So do you have a beer on your side? Are you going to drink a beer? Do you drink beer? Let's start with that.
So I used to drink a lot of beer, and then I kind of had to give it up for health reasons. I'll drink a beer every now and then when I'm on tour and stuff, but it's usually like one beer. So unfortunately, you caught me at the wrong time of my life when it comes to talking about beer. But I can tell you a little bit about it. Like I've drank a bunch of the beers that True has over there. I've drank several of the beers, Three Floyds beers and Wake Brewing beers. So, I don't drink all the time, but when I do drink, I like to drink nice beer.
Hell yes. And you named like 3 homies of mine, 3 good friends of mine. You're from Denver. Obviously, I have it written here. When I saw that, I wrote down True next to that. I was just there in September when Cryptopsy rolled through and was totally well taken care of. Zach has been on the podcast a bunch of times. And I met the buddy from Wake that was Shane was running the tap room that day, and I got super well welcomed by them. The guys in Wake, I've never been there, but I've done a bunch of collabs with them, and I love them to death. So Denver craft beer, you seem to have had a bunch of great beers. Was it a problem weaning it off? If you want to talk about that or open to talking about that, and then only having one beer, is that something that you had to learn to do, or was it just an easy acceptance?
Well, it sucks because I love beer. I mean, I love beer. Grew up drinking beer. My parents would give me little things of beer when I was like real young, like love beer my whole life kind of shit. And then is a different time.
Yeah,
And
it was a totally different era, and and even though no, we say that now, but it's still extremely acceptable in Europe to give wine to young kids at dinner, but it's a different culture, let's say.
yeah, yeah. So I've always loved beer, drank a bunch of beer growing up, and then but I've always been more of a weed guy. So I think that that's probably why it was easier for me to just kind of go to having one because at least I have a little bit, a little something there. But I definitely love beer. And, after I have the one, I'll consider having another, but it's a slippery slope for me. So,
It's true. No, it's 100% true. And I hope I don't experience that today. And I hope you don't mind. But I am going to have a beer since it's Vox and Hops. And my good friends sent me this. So I wanted to showcase it on the podcast. This is from Kahnawake Brewing. They made a stout and they've canned it. And I'm not sure for how long they've done this, but it's their Bammer, 4.5%. Nice afternoon stout. What are you sipping on there? I just saw you take a sip of something there.
oh, just a cup of coffee. I wanted to at
There we
least have something to drink while we talked because I figured you'd be drinking beer. So,
I tend to do that. Pouring this out, talk when you were drinking beers, what was your style that you would gravitate towards? If you're going to True, you're going to drink some funky wild stuff. The other places, Wake makes killer haze. What was your poison of choice?
I think everything but bitters. I'm not a bitters guy. I just can't do it. I like a stout. I'll even do an IPA. I think I like a stout the most, but the issue with the stout is that, it fills you up. So you really only gonna drink a couple of them. But I think a lager, if I'm going for a volume of beers, you know.
It is
But
much easier to crush a bunch of lagers for sure. There's
yeah, I mean, if imagine drinking 12 stouts, you are gonna feel like just like returning back to the bread. You're gonna feel like shit.
there are times in my life that I try not to eat bread um, because I have liquid bread every day. So it's basically just that. It's a very high carb lifestyle that I lead. This is nice. It's smooth. It's delicate. The body is creamy. Shout out to Drew and the rest of the K-Town team for consistently making awesome beers. And now they're canning them in these black cans, and I just think it's awesome. Love it. Love it. Classic Vox and Hops question. I would love to hear about the soundtrack of your youth. Now, it sounds like your parents were very cool and liberal, feeding you beer at a young age. I would love to hear what was playing on the radio when you were not in control of it. What did your parents or guardians listen to in the house as you were growing up?
So this is a kind of a complicated question to answer. So a lot of rock and roll and stuff, and from my mom, and then my mom married a man when I was really young, like when I was 2 years old. Her and my father, split up. She met another guy, married him when I was two, and he had a son that was 13 years older than me. So
Wow.
I would hear like a lot of rock and roll from him and my mom, and then from my older brother, he was playing shit like Slayer and all this shit from like really young dude. So I've been exposed to heavy metal my whole life. And my birth father listened to a lot of jazz and soul and music like that. So yeah, like a lot of stuff. Like music has been important in both of the households that I grew up in my whole life, and it just continued to be important for me. There's always music playing, so but
That's super sick.
anything from Slayer and Exodus in my house to Sade, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Hell
So
yes. I went through a Sade phase.
yeah, I've loved Sade my whole life too, man. I still listen to her. So
Oh yeah, totally. When I was getting up, we were getting the ultrasound for my daughter, who's now 7. Sade was playing on the radio, and I remember that.
oh, that's nice.
so so basically, so basically, you had like a whole palette of colors to play with as you got older and started to be experimenting with music yourself. Was there ever something that was so shocking? Probably not, because your brother was playing all the extreme stuff already. That when you brought it into the house, it was just too much for people.
Okay, well, my brother stopped at Slayer in terms of heaviness. So um I got into like Cannibal Corpse and this kind of shit, and that was way too much for anyone. He doesn't even, didn't even like that kind of shit back then. So I think as soon as I started to cross over into death metal and things like that, is when it was too much for my family.
It's interesting that you had it at such a young age and to have that extremity, the speed, the aggression. A lot of people, and myself included, is I discovered metal and more extreme music in my teens. And it was something shocking. Like I was a new metal child listening to Korn, and then when I discovered like Slipknot, Cannibal Corpse, I was like, oh my God, this is like I don't understand this. And I had to acclimate my palate, much as I did with beer, to appreciate finer and finer, more extreme things. Growing up
um,
and having it at such a young age, everything must have already been like nothing could surprise you almost. It's like when my kids listen to extreme music all the time, or they're walking around the house screaming, I can't tell them to stop because this is the music that's playing in the house most of the day when I'm here.
um, I think that like Morbid Angel and Cannibal Corpse was shocking to me. I remember falling asleep listening to Covenant as a kid, like just like, just like in your room, you've been jamming it
And
all day and playing guitar and you just like kind of fall asleep. And
same.
and I remember waking up to that fucking synth track on there, like being kind of creeped the fuck
Yeah.
out. So like that stuff I think was could still be scary. And also I grew up in a house in a religious home.
Mm.
So the
The artwork,
the
the
themes and stuff.
symbolism.
Yeah, I had to hide all of that. And I
Okay.
remember I'll never forget when my mom found all of that shit. She was so upset. It was insane. So yeah, I mean, definitely all of the death metal was not cool. And I remember when the first Korn record came out too, and I was in fourth grade. And I'd already heard like thrash and stuff, but Korn was like a different sound, and so we were all really kind of pumped about it, that it
Mhm.
was cool. And then I distinctly remember that in sixth grade, when they came out with their second record, we all thought it was bullshit, and we stopped listening to it. And then everyone got really into extreme shit
Wow.
immediately after that. So I grew up in like a really interesting time, and with my home, it's my perspective of heavy music is might be different than a lot of people just
Yeah.
because I did so young.
That's super, super awesome. And it's interesting that at sixth grade, you were already like a gatekeeper.
Well,
What the
I already
hell is
had
happening to this
opinions,
new metal shit?
dude. But I already had strong opinions. Like I remember my brother, he bought me Master of Puppets. He bought me an Offspring tape. He bought me a White Zombie tape, a Nirvana tape, a Pearl Jam tape. Like I remember all of this shit is like early things, and that's just such a spread of sound and taste that I think that I just like really latched onto what I liked, early. Like a lot of stuff that I listened to as a young man, I still like,
Hell yes.
to this day.
Hell yes. I think that happens to us though. That's as we get older. We're the same age. We're about the same age. I saw that as I was setting up for this. And we have very different paths because of the house that you grew up in versus what I grew up in. I leaned heavily into new metal, whereas you fell into the opposite of that, leaning into the more extreme stuff, which is interesting because at the time, all the bands that were extreme were suffering or losing some fan base because of the mass appeal of new metal. And then all these bands, like Slayer did a new metal album, Sepultura did their new metal album. It's interesting. It's interesting. And here you were waving the flag for extremity while everyone else was sort of dipping into the new metal.
And I remember that being so niche. Like I remember that time. And the thing is I liked Pantera too, and I liked Down, and I liked all of that shit as well. But I didn't really like Slipknot, and I didn't follow along with Korn. I didn't like Mudvayne or like any of that stuff. But I remember like I just remembered I remember that period of time when extreme metal was truly underground.
Yeah.
Like now it's not that at all, but I remember that, man, distinctly. People thought you were such a fucking loser if you liked that kind of shit. Like it's good now that it isn't that way, but I do
No, no, no.
remember.
there's a huge resurgence going on right now. There's also a resurgence going on in nu metal, so I wonder what you think about that. Do you understand it now? Is there a different perspective coming back 20 years later to revisit it?
Oh, I wish I could tell you that I had some like enlightened opinion on nu metal, but I actually don't. And I made the mistake of going at length about that on another one of these
Oh yeah.
a couple of years ago with the Doc Coyle and
Oh, I love him. He's actually one of the influences of the podcast. So
well, no, very nice guy, but him and I have such different opinions on music. so I don't knock people for liking what they like, and I think that there's flavors of that music that I do like. Like I like the Deftones sexy records,
oh yeah, I was listening to Deftones this morning.
Yeah, like from like White Pony and the one with the skull on it, and I think there might be another one that I think is pretty good. And then yeah, I mean I like some of that flavors of that stuff, but it's just very limited for me, like I would never tell you that I thought that Machine Head was sick or anything when I was a kid. But Machine Head's a bad example because I guess okay, here's my enlightened view of that. As a grown man, Machine Head sounds a little bit different to me than like most of the new metal they got grouped into. That shit doesn't sound like El Nino, you know what I mean?
Oh hell no,
no.
But they were like doing something and then they dipped into nu metal and then they just kept elements of it.
Yeah, so it's confusing because at the time I'm seeing them and I'm thinking like this is a fucking new metal band, but I guess it's not. But I don't know, man. Mudvayne, I don't like that shit. Korn's later records, I'm not putting that shit on. But I don't knock anyone that likes it, and I also don't knock those musicians because now it's like it's a different world for them now too. And so to see that rise and fall and then rise again of that stuff is pretty interesting.
I think it's super interesting, and I've spoken at length about it with other people, and the fact that it played in households and then those kids are now old enough to go to the shows. I think that has part to do with it, and it's this, we're running out of headliners, sadly.
Well, dude, the thing of it, yeah, absolutely. Like we're gonna lose Judas Priest. We lost Slayer. We're gonna lose a lot of the larger bands. Metallica's not gonna go forever. So they're gonna get replaced by your Slipknots and like your Korns and all of that other shit. And I think that's chill. That's cool. And I'll give nu metal credit for putting people on to heavier stuff before they could get into extreme music. Like I don't want to like be as psychotic as I've been in the past about how much I don't like the genre.
I had no idea that this was a polarizing topic with you when I brought this up.
It is a very polarizing topic for me. If you look it up in the past, I've like been just fucking indignant about it. But the people that approached me about it in the past were like, I think feedback is bullshit. What's your opinion on nu metal? You know what I'm saying? So automatically, I'm like, in the fucking band I'm in, I'm like, oh, you think that feedback is bullshit? Like something, it's so
No, I'm a nu metal child, so I just found it very interesting, and I had no idea. I apologize. Shows. Let's talk about our first show. I went to go see one of my first big shows was a nu metal show, and it was it was Machine Head, Slipknot, and Cold Chamber headlining. I'd love to hear about the first show you went to go see.
Okay, so the first big show I ever went to go see was Rage Against the Machine with the Roots.
That's a musical experience right there.
It was cool. I had a blast. Me and my little friends had so much fun. I was about 13. But before that, my older brother, because he was playing in bands, took me to some of his band shows, and they were like hardcore bands, like Integrity sounding hardcore, Integrity Snapcase era kind of hardcore. So I was also listening to a ton of that because my brother kind of got into those bands. And but yeah, so that the first show I ever went to was one of his shows, and I like had my Danzig 4 shirt on at this hardcore show, and it's just like fucking enjoying that experience. But then I saw Rage and the Roots, and that was very cool.
These massive productions, huge rooms. I remember just being like in my first mosh pit when you can't control where your body's going because the crowd is moving you.
Yeah, man. Oh man, I know. I remember that shit. I remember having that experience as well, being young. I think that the first time I experienced that was actually the Slayer show, and I tore my meniscus from that
Yeah,
shit. I got
yeah.
pushed over and fucked up my leg. I'll never forget that. It was so violent back then.
Oh yeah,
Crazy.
just intensity, just awe-inspiring intensity. And now I'm in pit retirement unless I'm on stage directing them.
Man, you won't catch me in a fucking mosh pit to save your goddamn life.
It's fun though. It's fun to watch from afar.
Yeah, I mean, I love it when people do it, but I just can't participate anymore.
It's I don't know if yeah, we'll see. How about like
It
your
depends. I
brother?
might for the right fucking thing. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. What about your brother was in a band? Was it an automatic that you wanted to be in a band? Was it an inspiration because of him, or did that come from somewhere else?
Yeah, he's definitely. I loved him. I love him to this day. I looked up to him as a young man. So yeah, I think that wanting to be like Keith was a big thing for me, but also I just loved music
Mhm.
and art. Like I've always just been really into music and art since I was a little kid, man. They wanted me to play sports because of my size, and I just did not. And I played them, but I didn't play them like they wanted me to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I always wanted to do this shit. So yeah, I think being like Keith and just having a love for this, just all I've ever wanted to do is play music, like or be a comedian. Those are like the two things I ever wanted to
Really?
do. Yeah, that's all I can remember wanting to do. I've never wanted to do anything else.
What were
Every
those?
job I had, I fucking hated because it's not like music. So
Well, good for you for getting it done now. Comedians. What comedians were resonating with you that inspired you there?
when I was young, man, I actually don't remember who I thought was funny. I think Eddie Murphy,
Hmm.
probably.
Those
It's
the Delirious and the other cassette. They're those two
yeah, Eddie
iconic
Murphy.
tapes there.
Yeah, Eddie Murphy is like the comedian I remember from when I was the youngest. That's probably why. And I love Beverly Hills Cop and shit, so it makes sense.
Hell yes.
Yeah.
Was it hard for you to craft your own identity
Oh,
as a
Richard Pryor,
musician?
actually,
Oh,
because the
hell yes.
toy, that movie, The Toy, I
Okay,
love
interesting.
that.
I don't
Yeah.
think I've ever seen that prior.
That oh man, this movie is so fucking inappropriate.
The
You can
toy.
never make that shit. And my father bought that for me, which is even funnier. Yeah, The Toy. You go watch that movie. It's funny.
I wrote it down. I love it. Was it hard to get out of Keith's shadow and find your own identity as a musician? Was that something that you had to struggle with, or it just happened?
No, actually, my brother helped me get into my first band that played
Nice.
club because he was playing in these hardcore bands, and then I've been playing since I was real young, and then my brother was moving out of town, and then everyone needed a bass player, so then I just got absorbed into the music scene that my brother was in. Very cool. I owe him for that
Hell
too.
yes.
So
The
I'm like
ultra vouch. The ultra
it was
vouch.
yeah, it was cool, man. I'm like 16 playing with dudes in their mid-20s, playing the clubs, like getting
Nice.
getting exposed to that environment. And I'm also big, so bars weren't questioning me.
Because there are those stories of like you're allowed to play, but then you get the bracelet and you got to get kicked right out. And then there's that other story where the guy has to play outside. So that didn't occur for you.
No, it didn't. I never had that happen to me, but I've heard those stories. But I think just because my fucking size, man, they were just like, oh, look at this boy. They just let me in there. And Denver used to be more of a Wild West scenario. We didn't used to be this big metropolitan city like it is now. This shit used to be way mm, different. It was a wild place.
I've always had good shows there, but I think I only started touring through there in the 2010s. So I'm sure it had already evolved since then.
2010 was kind of at the tail end of when it was what it was, when I grew up.
What was that first time you on stage? Do you remember that? Your first show ever?
Yeah. It was at this place called Blondie's Firehouse, and it's probably like a 70 cap room.
Wow. Which is a
And
lot for a first show. That's still intimidating.
well, but I was with older guys. So if you mean like first show, real first show, I threw a party in my parents' basement when I was like 11, and me and my little friends tried to play in front of our friends, and then that was it. So
Really?
first show was very young, but I
At
knelt that.
11. That
Yeah,
counts.
11 years old.
That's like, were you guys ready?
No, we sucked. It was fucking garbage.
You
But
playing covers or are you doing originals already?
no, we were playing covers. We're like 11 years old,
I
man.
know, you never know. Some people are proficient,
No,
prolific.
no, we were playing covers and well, yeah, so that's the first real show, but or first show, but the first real show is a this club, Blondie's Firehouse. It isn't even open anymore.
No,
And
that's
actually
something.
back then that fucking place is called the Shot Glass Company for anyone from Denver listening to this who's over the age of 40. So yeah, Shot Glass Company. My band was called Hem Rage, and I played the bass. And I remember that the owner of the bar had just gotten breast implants, and that they all thought it was really funny to have this young kid around. And that lady kept being like, "If you play good enough, I'll show you my tits."
My gosh.
Yeah,
Did
it's
you did you
crazy.
play did you play?
Fuck no, bro. She didn't do that. They just were just saying that shit to me.
Were you guys ready? I assume if they're older guys, they like rehearsed, but not every band is has, let's say, a healthy relationship with band practice.
No, we were practicing twice a week. I was going and hanging out with these dudes in this dank ass basement. You know,
That's a
it
good
was
etiquette to learn early on. And band practice for a lot of bands is once a week. But when you want to do something for real, you got to get up there to the 2, 3 times a week, which is what I did when I got into my first Montreal-based band, 3 Mile Scream. Shout out to Mike Marino, also works for Audio Technica, which is why I have this mic. And he ingrained that in me, that band practice is a way of life. It's a way of creating relationships with your bandmates. It's a way of working the band as a business into something that actually does something because you have continual band meetings all the time. And then I joined Cryptopsy and we didn't jam for the first 6 months I was in the band. And I was like, what the fuck is going on here? And that's something that's continued. But you have band
one of
practice
my
today.
Yes, I do. Primitive Man is really good. We do 2 days a week.
Hell yes.
We do once a week, but we also don't do as much shit. So
Hell yes. But it's important, people. Practice. Don't be like Cryptopsy.
no, man. I mean, yeah, we got to do it.
We
We got to do.
grind is what we do. We grind before, and then the first few days of tour are not, we're not the proudest of. That's the true story of everything. I want to talk about sound. You mentioned feedback. I like feedback, and I like sound, and I like the intensity of Primitive Man. And I have heard from a bunch of people that you guys are one of the loudest bands that they've ever gone to see.
Cool.
Talk to me
I
about
appreciate
sound. Talk to me
that.
about crafting something that's more than just intensity. You want to craft horror. You want people to be horrified. You want to create a sonic experience, and that's really what Primitive Man and the meat of this conversation is going to be about.
Yeah, man, we really want to create atmosphere. I think that our first record and like some of the splits we did were real riff heavy and like kind of more on the traditional side of doom and sludge, And then as we evolved as a band, we really wanted to create atmosphere, create a sense of dread and overwhelming power and pressure and weight in the sound because the subject matter is very deep. So for me, I want people to have like a small taste of what that turmoil at the time may have felt like for me. The music is to reflect that. And I think that the only way to really do that is by having a fuckload of amps and for being very loud and for dialing your tone in to do it in a specific way. Like John, the bass player, is very crucial to us sounding the way that we are. If John didn't have that tone that he does, Primitive Man would not be the same band. And I also wouldn't be able to play the way that I do without him holding it down the way that he does. He's incredible at that. So I think that having him command the low end in the way that he does gives me the opportunity to color the rest of the music in such a fucked up way. You know what I mean? But really the power of the amps is crucial to that. And it sucks because when we go over to Europe, we can only play through half of the stuff. So I feel like European audiences, unless they've seen us at a festival, have not like if you
Experience.
just see us a club, yeah, you're not getting the full effect at all. And it's unfortunate, but I hope that one of these days we can make it happen. Like, I love Sun. I love I love them very much. They're a huge influence on Primitive Man, even though we're not doing it drone how to do. The smothering atmosphere was something that I wanted to bring into the space of a rock band, I guess I say with quotes there. So, I would love it if we could get to a place where no matter where we play, we have what we need, and for the art to be the way that it's intended to be shown.
That must be frustrating. And do you have an amp sponsor at this point?
Um, so Dean Costello amps in Chicago, I would say, and then Orange have hooked me up and have like made it doable for me to have a lot of amps. They haven't given me free amps, but they've made it doable for me to
Okay,
find
well,
a find a
Orange,
price point.
I hope there's an Orange in Europe, and I hope that they're listening. And hook a man up, there's just you're robbing the Primitive Man fan base of the true experience.
But I don't know that Orange very care very much about Primitive Man, but I think that they're aware that I'll give them money for some amps every once in a while. But
Now,
Dean Costello out of Chicago, Dean Costello Audio is a big supporter of ours, and it's helped me shape my tone with those heavy metal warfares, and it's essential. But over in Europe, we only play through Orange because that's all that's available. So
Cryptopsy for the past few years, Chris has had a camp. Before he had a Kemper, he had the other thing. Was it a Line 6? No, that doesn't make any sense. Doesn't fractal. Anyways, doesn't matter.
Well,
Kemper.
man, but the thing of it is that the style is just so different. A lot of these guys, like we did a tour with Fit for an Autopsy, and
Yes, Will and
those
everyone.
dudes, yeah, those dudes use Kemper. I'm pretty sure it was them, or maybe, yeah, because the dudes in Acacia Strain use tube amps, and we were out with them as well. But yeah, those dudes use Kemper, and they make that shit work. I've played with a lot of musicians who can make those work. One of the dudes in Crowbar uses one of those too, and has real good tone from it. But I just think that it it just would not work for us at all.
It's the room experience, and that's what I was building to. It's so quiet, and we don't even have amps on stage anymore. Now that we've transitioned to in-ears, and I'm literally going after this. I have an appointment to get molds done for my in-ears, and it's so quiet on stage, and that's something that is very different between Cryptopsy and a Primitive Man show, and the evolution of how quiet a show can be. You go see these bands side stage nowadays, and you can't hear a single thing at a festival because there's no amps. There's just drums and maybe vocals, and you can hear it coming from the FOH, the front of house speakers that are leading out to the crowd. It's interesting that you guys are going so in the opposite direction and creating a wall of sound, which is what used to happen back in the day because things were just the PAs weren't strong enough. Nowadays, it's the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of times what they'll do is that they just won't put the amps through the mains.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
so we're using the full power of the amps, and then the drums, vocals, synths, all that stuff.
Front of
Yeah,
house.
yeah. And we have a sound person now, Kim, who
Which is essential too if you have to be because like if you have house guys who are used to dealing with anything, and then you guys come through and they're always like, turn it down.
they do that, but mostly in Europe.
They're very strict about DBs in Europe.
They are, but everywhere else that we've played, they've been like, turn that shit up. And
Hell yes.
it's awesome. But having our own person has been essential. But we have met some really gifted and talented sound engineers in-house over the years. Which the funniest one is that one of the guys from that band, the Spin Doctors, one time mixed
No
Primitive.
way.
This dude had us sounding fucking amazing. I was
Wow.
like, this guy was in Spin Doctors.
Unbelievable.
This is crazy. So,
Unbelievable.
yeah.
How do you deal with a lot of people? We suffer from tinnitus. It's something that knowing Frank Marino, who's a guitar legend from here in Montreal. His nephew was in 3 Mile Scream, Mike, who I mentioned before. Mike had told me that Frank has horrible tinnitus from years and years of ear abuse, and he's has to learn to love the sound that is ringing in your ears. Is something that I don't have horrible ear damage, but I definitely have a bit of tinnitus. How do you guys deal with that? The sonic power coming from behind you all the time. Is that something that you've learned to deal with over your life, tinnitus, and is it something that you actively protect against?
Joe wears in-ears and protects his ears when he plays now. I think that drummers really get it bad, dude. You guys
The
are in front of
cymbals, yeah.
the cymbals, the snare, you're in front of the amps. When you're like us, drummers get that shit so much worse than everybody. So it's good that he's doing that now. But yeah, in-ears for him. John wears earplugs at practice. I'll wear earplugs at practice because it's a smaller room. And we don't play as loud at practice as we used to for our hearing because we
And
used
your
to be
neighbors, and your neighbors
loud.
are just very, very happy.
Well, they still complain, so it's fine. But we're in a room with a bunch of different bands and shit, and the landlord is constantly moving fucking bands around that are loud because quiet bands can't handle it when we practice. But which I appreciate. Shout out to Fish. But so what was I getting at? Yeah, so wearing earplugs at practice, Joe wearing in-ears. Live, I do not wear them. John, I think, goes back and forth depending on what's going on. And I have a little bit of tinnitus, but I don't have it like you would think. And I don't know why. I've speculated that it's because of my height,
Mhm.
and I stand
Cymbals, just yeah.
if I stand far away enough from them, then it's just not happening for me. But but if I'm close to the amps and shit and I don't have ear protection, if we're in a small situation, yeah, my ears will be fucked up. So I try not to do that kind of thing anymore. If I know that I'm going to be in a situation like that, which we're not in those situations as much as we used to be anymore. I think that playing larger venues has helped with that as well. But then I guess you
There's
just
more
have more.
space. Yeah.
There's just more space, and if we're using the amps as we've always used them, with them not putting it through the main. So I don't know. The only thing I can say for me is maybe it's me being so tall, it's just not hitting me in the same way that it does a lot of people. But I'm not a doctor. I don't know shit. I don't know if that's true. Maybe in a couple of years, I'll be all fucked up and I'll be like, oh man, I should have not thought that was real. But I don't know.
Goddamn,
But I've
Mickey,
been,
I keep
but I've been
tempting fate.
playing. But now, man, I've been playing loud music for like over 20 years. So so far it's been okay.
Okay, let's keep it going in that direction. John Levasseur, who was in Cryptopsy for many years, between his 2 stints, because he took 7 years off, he went to go see an audiologist, and he was expecting to have ear damage. And the only thing had a little bit of a reduction in his left ear, which because he stands on stage right, and it was the cymbals on that side that got him, he thinks.
Yeah, so I stand kind of to the side. So if it'll be anything, it'll be my left ear. But I have like nice earplugs that I'll try and wear. So also the reason I don't wear
I was going to ask that.
I have a reason.
Yeah.
Is because of the singing. If I have earplugs in, I only hear myself, and I hear myself in a way that it doesn't sound like that out there.
It's true. And it fucks with your brain.
Up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then
like,
I start
oh
doing
God,
goofy shit.
Stuck. Yeah.
I start doing goofy shit with my voice because it sounds different. So I just can't. With the singing, it's impossible.
Have you considered in-ears? Is that something that is a future, or is it just it's going to take away from that sonic experience that you're creating?
Well, I think I kind of like the sensations.
Yeah. Because it's real quiet. That's the thing. Yeah. We just did the switch there, and a lot of singers have a hard time switching. But I've always sang with the earplugs, the molded fitted earplugs. I've had those for 10 years. Those are way better than the squishy, whatever you got there. If you get like the molded, just that cuts 25 dB there, that won't fuck with your voice. That
Yeah, maybe I'll try that out. I have to look into more expensive options, I think. I've thought
an
about the
investment.
in-ears.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've discussed that with the in-ears for me. We did a tour of Baroness and all of them have in-ears and shit, but no,
All,
not
all the
us.
silly jokes you can put in your ears that no one hears in the front of houses. It's great. It's don't fuck
Well,
this
I
part
think
up, man.
right. Well, I think that having a sound engineer is new for us for the last 3 years now. We've had a sound engineer. And I think that having her with us opens up the door to shit like in-ears and like all
Oh
these
yeah.
things that
If you have someone
we
that can control it from,
we wouldn't have considered before,
we'll
so.
see. We'll see. We'll take care of yourself. That's for sure. Something that you've done a whole bunch of, and I think it's super interesting, and Cryptopsy's never done, is a bunch of splits. So doing research with you have basically three, let's say, true albums, 4 true albums. I didn't count the numbers, but a handful of those, but you have way more splits. So talk to me about the decision of teaming up with other bands and what that brings you. Is it the exposure? Is it just a fun camaraderie that you want to expand upon? I'm curious about that.
It's all of that. Um, the splits with Hell and Unearthly Trance are my favorite, and with Fister. And those are all bands that I love and respect their art very much, and everything else. Earlier splits before that were like us trying to expose ourselves to someone else's audience and vice versa. Underground bands kind of trying to help each other out and whatever else. So, it's a little bit of mix of everything. But now if we were to do a split with a band, it would be simply because we are friends and like their art, you know. But
It's
back in the
interesting
day,
to step into a room with someone else and just bouncing off different auras to create something completely new is super, super interesting.
oh, do you mean splits or collaborations?
Both, honestly. But the splits is like when you take two separate things and you mash them together and you release them. A collaboration is when you do something together.
Yeah. The only one of those we've done is with Full of Hell, and we had a wonderful time doing that shit. I would do that again with another band in a heartbeat. It would just have to be someone who we like what they do, and vice versa. But yeah, man, I love doing stuff with other bands. It's fun. Teaming up is always good, but we don't get to do it as much these days. The Full of Hell thing was the first thing we did with another band in a long ass time.
Because you guys are busy and popular and you're going on a bunch of tours and Napalm Death inviting you guys out to Europe, and that's why you're busy and in demand, which is a good thing to embrace. I'd love to. I interviewed. Oh my, his name is escaping me at this point. Is he? It's about failure, and he listed the 5 rules of failure, how to fail, and then take that and then turn those failures into positive life lessons. I really am upset I don't remember his name. Doesn't matter. I would love to hear about the biggest failure that happened in your career, but you learned the most from.
I've experienced so many ups and downs, and I'm like at the front of a lot of stuff that we do, like
The decision making, yeah.
yeah, and like oh man, I just the biggest. So you even say mistake? Is that what you said?
Mistake, failure,
Um,
something. It's not necessarily a failure. It's
well,
something that a bad business decision, something that happened within the band.
it's just so difficult for me to pick one thing. I can think of a million
The
fucking
one that
things.
that taught you the most.
The one that taught me the most.
Like we have to say no to a lot of tour offers, and then sometimes you see that tour get announced, and you know your logo's not there, and that's something that you're like, ugh. And then
Well,
the reason you turn down the tour is for something else, and that falls through. That could hypothetically be one.
I think that the thing for me that I've learned is that you have to, okay, I've been in bands before Primitive Man that no one was willing to take huge risks to make it happen. So if we were to get a tour offer for something and it was in at an inopportune time, we would
Mhm.
not take it. We wouldn't do it. Then the band continues as it was, which is okay if you can like grind hard enough to kind of get your own following, create your own culture around your own band and like do that sort of thing. But you really do need those support opportunities and you really do need to be able to have a flexible schedule to meet those things. So with Primitive Man, when I started that band, it was like very explicitly communicated that we needed to be ready to like fuck everything up to make it happen. So for years, we were quitting jobs, faking weddings, faking family reunions, all of this fucking shit to our jobs to be able to
Wow.
make it happen. And then as we've gotten older and can this Primitive Man specifically, as we've gotten older and been able to keep the band together, everyone has molded their lives around doing the band and
Mhm.
like make their personal life work around that. And I think that that's the biggest lesson that I learned after over a decade of failure before, because the band I was in before was a decade of failure, dude. We were trying so fucking hard, but it was just with like DIY touring and doing it by ourselves. But again, we didn't get these opportunities. It was not coming together for us. Shit sucked. So yeah, that first 10 years of me trying to do it at this level on my, like, as the front man of my band and as the person making the plans, is that you really do have to mold your life around being able to do the touring band. If you want to eventually go on tour with your fucking heroes, it's just not gonna happen if you don't do that, which is like so brutal to when I say it out loud, but I know from life experience, and I also book bands and I see it happen for them, the bands who are unable to like make this shit work because of whatever reason, and then they can just never take these support opportunities, and then we're just like slogging away in the trenches for them, trying to make things work for them on their own momentum. And I think that like, yeah, you got to give your life to it. You have to give your life to the art.
I do agree that some people have to come to terms with that they're going to be a weekend warrior band.
Yeah, and that's fine, and there's a place for that, and that's okay for people. And I think that at the root of everything I'm saying, it's like, what is your desire? Like
Exactly.
my desire, like my desire is to play is many cool shows with cool bands and bands I like and looked up to, and travel and make a little bit of money, and if I can, and whatever else, but to at least never have to pay out of my pocket again to be able to do this shit. Like for us, a lot of it is like, I just don't want to have to like eat barbecue sauce on rice to
Again.
go. And
The
again, to go and do.
peanut butter and the Wonder Bread, the Wonder something bread, the squishy big white bread that's cheap as fuck.
The Primitive Man of early, we were living like shit. Like I say all this, but it's like it's not easy, and I get why people don't want to fucking do that to themselves. It takes a specific kind of person with a specific kind of goal, but I think, yeah, come to terms with it. If you're not willing to give your life to the art, then be comfortable with growing slowly, be comfortable with making your own way, be comfortable with watching the people who do it get the things that you want and not be salty about it.
That is very wise right there. And I also think like if you are the person in a band, say you're watching this right now or listening to this right now, and you're in a band and you are that person that's can't liberate themselves or won't take those risks and you're holding back this band, hypothetically, you have a decision to make there to let your brothers or let your bandmates, let your team go on and you should step back, hypothetically.
Yeah, you got to let people be free. You cannot, yeah, don't hold back your bandmates. Like if everyone else in the band wants to do that and you want to do it, you got to let them go. And
Absolutely.
because they love you and don't want to fire you. And so what you're doing is that
That's
you're
one of the
dragging
hardest things to
everybody
do.
down.
That's
Yeah, dude,
literally one of the hardest things to do. Yeah.
that shit is a fucking mess. And I've had unfortunately have had to let people go in the past because they weren't able to do shit, which is like a terrible feeling and not something that I wanted to do because I liked them as people
Yeah.
and liked playing with them, but I wanted to do things.
God damn.
Also, if you can't do that, make sure that you're making art that really like serves you because that's really what this is about. Besides all of the touring and like the business bullshit that comes along with that, like making honest art that serves you and your soul is number one. And I think that like people who are able to do that and are able to create to satisfy themselves and make good shit, that's half the battle. Like I remember then when I was because being able to do it as frequently is also a new thing for me. I have a whole fucking life before that of I worked for the school system and I was only able to go on school breaks, but I did choose that job because I had a lot of breaks to play. And I like children. But so I know what it's like. So I don't want anyone who's listening to this to think that I'm like talking down on anyone who doesn't do fucked up shit like eat barbecue sauce on rice and lose every girlfriend they've ever fucking had and every fucking job they've ever fucking had and all this shit. You know, like
Missing all your friends' weddings and missing.
yeah, every wedding, sometimes some funerals, like some
Yeah.
real crazy shit can happen if you're trying to do that. I'm not trying to talk down on everyone. It's just that's what it
Not
takes.
easy. So I didn't know you worked in the school system. I work in with kids too.
Yeah, man, I did for a long time. I worked for Denver Public Schools for 15 years.
Really? That's
So
awesome. That's awesome. We'll
yeah.
have to have a whole other chat about that. I love making beers because it's a big part of my identity. That's one of my favorite things to do. I've made over 80 of them in the past 5 years. If you could make something, doesn't have to be a beer because it doesn't necessarily fit you at this point, what would be the perfect collab for Primitive Man?
I really wish someone would make us some weed.
Yeah, you're not the first person
I,
to say that. Signs of the Swarm said the same thing to me.
yeah, I'm just like, I wish someone would make us some fucking weed. Or, or even like some coffee would be kind of cool because we all drink coffee, but I think that that's corny. So maybe just some.
Coffee's easier. I'll say that. Weed is possible, especially since you're in Denver. You just need to team up with a local grower and have it be only available in Denver, hypothetically, would make it easiest.
Yeah, I'm not good at I don't have a skill set of reaching out to people being like, hey, you want to make some weed for my band? So, I just hope it happens.
If someone's listening to this that makes weed in Denver, Ethan is waiting for your email.
Yeah, please hit me up. We would love to
What kind of weed
collaborate.
would be of the perfect Primitive Man weed?
A very heavy indica, like put you on your ass kind of weed. With maybe a little bit of that cerebral in there, maybe a nice indica leaning hybrid.
Hell yeah, and you can do like it'd have to be announced this way, and it'd have to. I think everything's legal enough that you could do this now, where you burn it at the shows and like shoot it out in the smoke, and then it's like a true experience. But people have to like consent to it beforehand.
Just stand at the front of the stage. I'll make sure you smell some fucking weed.
One last question. I typically ask about people's hangover cures, but that no longer applies. I have another segment called Fight the Hops. We'll wrap up with that. Fight the Hops segment is about a goal, a short-term goal that you're working on right now that you hope to accomplish within the next month, 2 months. What are you doing right now to fight the hops?
Short-term goal for Primitive Man or for myself?
Yourself, Primitive Man, it's up to you.
Well, we're working on a record right
Nice.
now, and we've got like one side of an LP written, I'd say. So I'd like to get that done. That's my short-term goal, is to get that done. But we've been writing these songs for a long time and really putting a lot of work into these, man. Like our previous albums, we would be in the middle of writing and then there would be some fucked up deadline we had to make, and then we would rush through stuff to get it done. So with this record, it's a little bit more we've been able to take our time and do a lot of things we haven't been able to explore in the past. So that's my number one short-term goal right now, is to finish the next Primitive Man record. And I got another one is trying to get Vermin Womb on a little tour.
There you go.
And, yeah, and I got a bunch of like performance arts stuff that I'm trying to complete as well, because I play noise and experimental music and drone all the. So I have a lot of that going on. It's like kind of coupled with some performance art that I'm working on as well. So I have a ton of short-term goals, like short-term, like 12 months, you know.
You need like another 72 hours a week, it sounds like.
Man, I really do. I really do. My number one challenge, to fight the hops, what I should do is I should drop some shit, because I do. I have a lot of projects and a lot of things.
You're booking bands, you have a noise project, you're 2 bands.
Yeah, man, I like to stay busy.
You have friends, I hope, that you still see.
I do. I have some friends that I see that don't play music, and I just meet them twice a week for coffee.
Oh, I love that, because they don't fucking care. I have some friends from high school that I still see, and they don't give a fuck about what I'm doing, and that's amazing.
You have got to fucking have friends that are not in this shit. It is important. It helps you keep perspective. So many of these musicians in our little scene think that it's the biggest shit in the world. I'm like, actually, this is the smallest shit in the world.
It's true.
Shout
out to Laura and Tina for keeping me grounded.
Shout out to Brian.
Yeah, hell yes. Ethan, thank you so much for taking the time, hanging with me, talking about life, talking about music, talking about all kinds of amazing things. This was great. I'm glad we connected. I'm looking forward to meeting you face to face. Go to band practice. You got to do it. Wear earplugs.
Yeah, my best. I hope we get to run into each other. I'll be you're in Montreal, yeah?
Yeah, man.
Okay, I'll be up there. I think in the spring or the summer. I'll holler at you. You can come
I
and
love
hang
that.
out.
Please do. I might be somewhere else, which tends to happen in our relationships, but we'll make it work. And I'll holler at you if I'm ever back in Denver, which I hypothetically might be around that time too.
Yeah, man. Please let me know.
Have a great one. I appreciate you very much.
Yeah, take care, man.
All the best.
Hey, thank you all so much for listening right to the end. You know that I love and appreciate that. Man, this was another awesome conversation. Once again, the Vox&Hops album review crew introducing me to a musician. I love that. That's 2 weeks in a row. Last week with Rorcal, Jerry introduced me to them, and here we are again being introduced by Ben. Very stoked to have connected with Ethan. I loved our conversation. I literally had no idea that nu metal was going to be such a polarizing topic. I am a nu metal child, and I grew up in it, and I tend to bring that up in a lot of podcasts, and if you're a Vox&Hops head, you know that. Very stoked about what Ethan is doing about creating a sonic landscape with his music, creating a visceral experience for people in the audience with Primitive Man and everything he's doing. He is an artist. This is one of these people out there that is a truest form of artist, that word, and I am sort of jealous of that. I think it's very, very awesome and impressive that he's created such a vast persona and identity through his art, and that is something that I would hope to strive to do one day. So massive cheers to you, Ethan. I cannot wait to hang out with you face to face and have a chat with you, because I really, truly, truly enjoyed this chat. Now, if you enjoyed this Vox&Hops episode, you should sign up to the Vox&Hops Metal Podcast's mailing list. You could do that on my website, voxandhops.com. That's VOXANDHOPS.com. And when you do that, you shall receive one email a week that contains all of the details of everything that has happened in the world of the Vox&Hops Metal Podcast. You will get to see which episodes I dropped recently. You will also get to see which episodes I have coming up. You will get to hear about any projects I have in the works for the Vox&Hops Metal Podcast, and you will also be updated on whatever I got going on with Cryptopsy. That's right. Cryptopsy, we just dropped our brand new album back in September of 2023, and we are doing a whole bunch of stuff. We are planning a massive 2024, starting with that European tour, the Unquestionable Blasphemy Tour with Atheists that's coming up at the end of February. It's running all across Europe until the end of March. You will also get to see which albums the Vox&Hops album review crew have reviewed recently, and you will get to see which albums Jerry Monk, Vox&Hops' metal architect, has added to the Brutal Awakenings playlist. There's always a lot of stuff going on in the world of the Vox&Hops Metal Podcast, and I hate when you miss a single thing, so do me a favor and sign up to the mailing list. The Vox&Hops Metal Podcast is brought to you by Sound, Talent Media, and Evergreen Podcasts. I hope you have a killer rest of the week. week. I will be back next week with yet again another episode on Tuesday. But until then, remember to enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. Cheers, Vox and Hops heads.